I'm now joined by Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, to discuss this rail project. Franco, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
Now, Anita Anand has said that she's confident that the deal will minimize risk for taxpayers. What do you make of her claim there?
Well, I'm pretty confident that this is going to be a huge taxpayer boondoggle. Number one, this is insanely expensive. Okay, so just the development phase, the planning phase, will cost taxpayers about $4 billion. But who knows how astronomical this taxpayer tab will end up going? We have heard earlier estimates from Transport Canada that said that the cost could be as high as $80 billion. So this is an insanely expensive boondoggle. And hey, not to mention here that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is only going to be the Prime Minister for another couple of weeks. So there is no way that he should be announcing billions of dollars more being put on the credit card and taking Canadians further into debt.
Now, supporters will argue that these types of trains are common in Europe and drastically improve travel and foster economic growth. Are they right there?
First of all, look, if your friend does something silly, doesn't mean you should also do something silly. Let's look at the context here in Canada. The government is broke. Canadians are struggling with a cost of living crisis and can't afford any higher taxes, right? We know that the planning and development phase will cost about $4 billion. Transport Canada estimates the total tab could be as high as $80 billion. So we know the cost is going to be huge. What we don't know is how the government is going to pay for this, right? The government is more than $1 trillion in debt. Last year, the government's deficit was $62 billion. So the government is broke and taxpayers are tapped out.
Now, I want to ask you about Via Rail because we already have a rail network connecting these cities, albeit much slower. But is Via Rail successful, and does that maybe increase the likelihood of this new project being a success?
Well, Via Rail is only successful at losing money. I'm glad you brought up Via Rail because the government already has a train corporation, Via Rail, and it's hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. In fact, over the last 5 years, the government had to dump in $1.8 billion of taxpayers' money just to cover the operating losses of Via Rail, right? So we've already heard the planning and development tab of this high-speed rail will be $4 billion. Who knows how many tens of billions of dollars it will eventually cost taxpayers. And we better hope it's not going to be a money sucker like Via Rail, which is hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars every year just in operating losses.
And you already briefly mentioned the fact that Parliament is prorogued and why this is happening. But what do you make of the government announcing this while Parliament is prorogued and with a federal election just around the corner?
Well, it's absolutely wrong. I mean, number one, just given the fact that the government is more than $1 trillion in debt, and let's be honest, this is not a priority for the vast majority of Canadians. So just the fact that the government is doing that is wrong. But add to that Parliament is prorogued, the House of Commons is shut down, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is only going to be the Prime Minister for another couple of weeks. What is he thinking? What is the government thinking? Have they lost their minds? Here's what has to happen. Honestly, somebody has to take the credit card away from this lame duck Prime Minister before he takes Canada further into debt. And this debt problem is existential, okay? The debt interest charges alone are costing taxpayers more than $1 billion every week. Think about it this way. Every dollar that you pay in federal sales tax is already going to pay interest on the debt. We can't afford this. It's not a priority. And there's no way that Trudeau should be announcing that he wants to borrow billions of dollars more.
Now, you've made it quite clear that you're not the biggest fan of the new rail project, be it because of where the economy is at, the fact that Parliament is prorogued. But why do you think Trudeau is doing this right now?
That is a great question. I wish I knew what Trudeau was thinking because he's obviously not using economic sense. Is it political calculation? Is it legacy considerations? I don't know. But here's what I do know. Canadians can't afford it, and it's not a priority for the vast majority of Canadians, right? Think about the economic struggles facing Canadians right now. We're dealing with potential tariff threats from south of the border. We're dealing with a cost of living crisis. Our economy is not firing in all cylinders. So you know what the government should be doing right now? The number one thing it should be doing is ending the carbon tax. It's balancing the budget. It's cutting the wasteful spending. The very last thing the government should be doing is adding on more debt with this taxpayer boondoggle that, quite frankly, is not a priority for the vast majority of Canadians.
Well, Franco, as always, thank you so much for the time.
Hey, thank you.